They say some moments never leave you, no matter how many years pass, no matter how hard you try to forget. They cling to your memory, playing in a loop like a scratched record, over and over, until you begin to question whether they ever truly happened at all. It's been 2 years since that night, 2 years since I crossed a line I never imagined stepping over, 2 years since I stood on the edge of something dangerous, forbidden, and instead of retreating, I closed my eyes and let it happen. Scariest part. I still don't know if it was a mistake or a choice I'd been waiting to make all along. I remember the air that night, dense, suffocating, the way city lights melted together as I stumbled along the sidewalk, heels clicking sharply against the pavement, skin flushed from one too many glasses of wine. I wasn't supposed to drink that much. I had promised myself 1 glass, maybe 2. I had vowed to stay in control, but promises feel empty when you're already hollow inside, and I had been hollow for a long, long time. The work party was supposed to be a distraction, something light, fleeting, a temporary escape from the cold, quiet house I shared with my husband, a house that felt more like a museum than a home. He barely looked at me anymore, barely spoke. I had become furniture, something familiar, unnoticed. So when my coworkers laughed at my jokes, leaned in a little closer, let their gazes linger in ways my husband's never did, I let myself enjoy it. Just for one night. Just for a moment. But moments have consequences. By the time I stepped outside, the night was spinning. I was caught between tipsy and drunk, my phone slipping from my grasp as I tried to call my husband. It rang and rang. No answer. Of course not. I sighed, swaying slightly, the streetlights blurred. I needed to get home, but how? And then, his voice, a voice I'd heard 1,000 times, a voice that had always felt safe, familiar. Are you okay? I turned, blinking. He stood beneath the streetlight, his face half in shadow, eyes laced with something I couldn't quite name. Concern. Amusement. Or maybe something more. Ezra, my stepson, the last person I expected to see that night, the last person I should have called. But there he was, and in that moment, drunk, disoriented, I felt something shift. I should have said no, told him to leave. I should have done many things. Instead, I let him take my hand. I let him guide me to his car. And as we drove through the empty streets of Starhaven, his voice calm, his presence steady, something inside me whispered, "This is dangerous." And I didn't care. Before I tell you what happened next, make sure you subscribe to Secrets and Lies, where real-life confessions reveal the darkest corners of human emotion, because trust me, this story is just getting started. My name is Lila, I'm 38 years old, and if you had asked me a few years ago, I would have told you I had a good life. A stable marriage, a comfortable home, a routine that made sense. But somewhere along the way, that life became something else. It became lonely. Loneliness doesn't crash in like a wave. It seeps, slow and quiet, filling the gaps between silences and untouched skin, until one day you wake up and realize you're a ghost in your own life. That's what my marriage had become, a space where I existed but wasn't seen. My husband, Gideon, was a provider. He worked long hours, paid the bills, believed that was enough. Maybe for him, it was. But for me, it wasn't. I can't remember the last time he looked at me like a woman he desired, the last time he touched me without obligation, the last time he asked how I was and listened. Some nights, I'd lie beside him, staring at the ceiling, wondering how we'd gotten here, how two people who once couldn't keep their hands off each other had turned into strangers under the same roof. I told myself it was normal, that love changes, that passion fades. But then there was Ezra. Ezra, my stepson, wasn't a boy anymore. He was 25, strong, kind, and unlike his father, he saw me. It started small, casual talks in the kitchen while Gideon worked late, a joke here, a glance there. He made me laugh when I didn't feel like smiling. He listened. And slowly, I found myself waiting for those moments more than I should have. I told myself it was harmless, that I was just grateful for attention. But I knew better. Ezra had been in my life since he was a teen, but something had shifted. We understood each other in a way no one else seemed to, and maybe that understanding was becoming something more. Our home was beautiful, yes, but cold, a place echoing with silence. And in that silence, I started reaching for warmth anywhere I could find it. And that night, when Ezra appeared, I found it in him. The night started like any other, or so I told myself. It was the company's annual party. Normally, I wouldn't care, but this year, I needed a reason to dress up, to escape, to feel alive. I took extra time getting ready, slipping into a sleek black dress that hugged my curves just right. I stood in front of the mirror, tilting my head slightly, searching for the woman I used to be, the one who once felt beautiful, desired. I imagined Gideon behind me, his hands resting on my waist, whispering something tender in my ear. But when I stepped into the bedroom, he barely looked up from his laptop. "Don't wait up," I said, testing him, hoping for any reaction, a flicker of jealousy, even just a soft "be careful." He only nodded, his eyes still glued to the screen. And just like that, I had my answer. The party was at an upscale downtown bar in Crescent Fall, dimly lit, soft music weaving through the hum of conversations and clinking glasses. Laughter spilled from clusters of colleagues. It was lively, warm, everything my home hadn't been in a long time. I started with a glass of wine. One turned into two. Two became three. The more I drank, the lighter I felt, like I was peeling away the tired, unseen, unwanted version of myself. Silas, a coworker, leaned in closer as we spoke, his gaze lingering too long on my lips, his laughter coming too easily. I liked it. I liked the attention, the way his eyes moved over me, the way Gideon's hadn't in years. For a moment, I felt desirable again. I wasn't naive, I knew where the night could lead if I let it. But I also knew the truth, Silas wasn't the one I wanted. That realization struck harder than the alcohol. The room spun slightly, my body grew too warm. I needed air. I needed to go home. I fumbled for my phone, fingers clumsy as I dialed Gideon's number. It rang and rang and rang. No answer. Of course. I sighed, blinking against the dizziness. I could call a cab, or maybe I'd stay a little longer, just to hold on to this feeling. But then my phone buzzed. "Ezra, you okay?" I hesitated. The answer should have been easy, but my hands were already moving before my mind caught up. I drank too much. Trying to get home. I didn't expect a reply so fast. "Ezra, where are you?" I glanced around, typed the address. "Ezra, I'm on my way." I stared at the screen, my heart skipping, not from relief, but from something else. Minutes later, I stepped outside. The night air bit at my flushed skin, city lights blurred around me. Everything felt distant, surreal. And then I saw him. He leaned against his car, hands tucked in his pockets, eyes locked on mine. He looked different, not like the boy I'd helped raise, not like the stepson who once tracked mud across the kitchen floor. Tonight, he looked like a man. A man who had come without hesitation. A man whose gaze held something I couldn't name. I swallowed hard. He pushed off the car, walking toward me. "You look," he started, then stopped, eyes tracing over me in a way that made my breath hitch. "Beautiful." I let out a nervous laugh. I probably looked drunk. He smirked. "That too." Something hung in the air between us, heavy, unspoken, but I was too lightheaded to make sense of it. He reached out, steadying me with careful hands. The warmth of his fingers on my skin sent a shiver up my spine. It was a simple touch, innocent even, but it didn't feel innocent. I felt it when he led me to the car, his grip lingering just a second too long. I felt it when he helped me into the seat, his hand brushing my thigh. And I definitely felt it when our eyes met, just a beat too long, before he closed the door. When he slid into the driver's seat, the air between us crackled. I should have said something, a joke, a distraction, but I sat in silence, watching him, feeling things I shouldn't feel. As the car pulled away from the curb, one thought whispered through the haze, this is dangerous. And I didn't care. The ride home was quiet, but not the comfortable silence we used to share. This silence was thick, electric. With every mile, I felt it, the invisible thread pulling tight between us. I told myself I was imagining it. He was just being kind. I was just drunk. But I wasn't so drunk I couldn't feel it. I turned my head, watching him drive. His hands gripped the wheel, knuckles flexing. His jaw was tight, his gaze straight ahead. But every so often, his eyes flicked toward me, quick, subtle glances, barely noticeable. Except I noticed. And the way he looked at me, it wasn't how a son should look at his stepmother. Guilt surged, fast and hot, making my stomach turn. This was Ezra, the boy I'd raised, the son of the man I vowed to love. So why did it feel so good to have him here? Why did his presence soothe a part of me that had been aching for so long? I clenched my hands in my lap, breath unsteady. This was wrong. But if it was so wrong, why did I feel heat crawl up my neck when he reached for the gear shift, his fingers inches from my knee? Why did my stomach twist when he exhaled hard, gripping the wheel tighter, like he was fighting something too? I needed to get out of that car fast. When we pulled into the driveway, the house sat in silence, no lights, no sign of Gideon. Ezra cut the engine. I reached for the door handle, desperate to escape the tension, but then, you okay? His voice was quiet, steady. Too steady. I paused, then nodded. Yeah. Just too much wine. He didn't move. Neither did I. The air inside the car was dense, simmering with something I couldn't name. Ezra ran a hand through his hair. Come on, let's get you inside. I should have waved him off, should have laughed, should have walked in on my own. But when he opened my door and reached for me, I didn't resist. His arms slid around my waist as I stepped out, his touch firm but gentle. I could feel the strength in him, the quiet protectiveness. And for a moment, just a moment, I let myself lean into it. Because when was the last time someone took care of me? When was the last time someone looked at me like that? Stop. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing the thought away. This was the wine, the exhaustion. I needed to sleep. Forget. As he walked me to the door, his body warm beside mine, I could feel his gaze. And deep down, I knew he felt it too. I woke with a dull ache behind my eyes. Last night clung to me like a second skin. The room was dim, early morning light trickling through the curtains. My mouth was dry, my limbs heavy, but more than that, I felt uneasy. Not because of the wine. Because of him. Because of how his hands felt on my waist. Because of how he looked at me in the car. Because of the part of me, shameful, hidden, that wanted him to. I sighed, fingers tangling in my hair. I needed coffee, a cold shower, a reason to forget. Dragging myself from bed, I padded down the hallway. I expected silence, an empty kitchen. But he was there. Ezra stood at the counter, pouring coffee into a mug. He turned as he heard me, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. Something flickered across his face, something unreadable. Morning, he said, voice softer than usual. I swallowed. Morning. He turned, holding out the cup. Made you coffee. Thought you might need it. I hesitated before taking it, fingers brushing his for half a second too long. It was such a small thing, a touch, a simple, meaningless touch. But the air shifted. Or maybe it had already shifted, and I was just now noticing. I took a slow sip, hoping the bitterness would ground me. Thanks. You didn't have to. Ezra leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You feeling okay? I nodded, but I could tell he didn't believe me. And maybe he was right not to. Because standing there, with him watching me like that, like I was something fragile, something worth looking at, my body didn't feel like my own. It felt awake. And that terrified me. Over the next few days, something changed between us. It wasn't sudden, like a switch flipping. It was slow, careful, like the way fire spreads beneath the surface before anyone notices the smoke. It started with small things, a passing comment, a lingering glance, the way he leaned in just a little too close when we talked. And then, one night, we sat together in the living room. The TV played some mindless show neither of us was watching. Gideon was still at work, late as usual. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Ezra exhaled, running a hand through his hair. I don't get it, he said, voice low. I glanced at him. Get what? He turned his head toward me, eyes dark, unreadable. How he doesn't see you. My breath caught in my throat. I forced a laugh, shaking my head. Ezra, no. No, really, his voice sharpened, edged with something deeper. He has you, and he acts like you're invisible. I opened my mouth, closed it. Because what could I say? That I had been asking myself the same thing for years. That I'd spent endless nights wondering why my husband, his father, had stopped loving me the way he used to. I should have stopped the conversation there, gotten up, walked away, laughed it off, something. But I didn't. Because for the first time in so long, someone was saying out loud what I'd been too afraid to admit. I looked at Ezra, really looked at him, the way his jaw clenched, the frustration in his eyes, and something inside me cracked. Sometimes, I whispered, I feel like I could disappear, and he wouldn't even notice. Ezra's expression darkened. That's not okay. I swallowed hard. It's marriage. No, he said, his voice firm. It's not. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. And that was the moment I knew this wasn't just a dangerous thought in the back of my mind anymore. This was real. This was something neither of us could take back. It started with small touches, a brush of fingers when he handed me a glass of water, the way his hand lingered a second too long on the small of my back as he passed me in the kitchen. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was imagining it. But I wasn't. And neither was he. Because he wasn't pulling away. Because I wasn't pulling away. And the unspoken between us was growing louder. One night, we were watching a movie on the couch. Gideon had texted earlier, working late, don't wait up. Of course. The living room was dimly lit, just the soft glow of the TV casting flickering light across the room. Ezra sat beside me, close but not too close. Not at first. But then, at some point, his knee brushed mine. I could have moved away. I didn't. I felt his gaze on me, but I kept mine on the screen, pretending not to notice. Then his hand shifted, fingers grazing mine. A shiver ran down my spine. Still, I didn't move. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, feel my breath hitch in my chest. This was it. The line. The moment that changed everything. He turned his head slightly, and I could feel the warmth of his breath against my skin. If I looked at him now, if I met his eyes, I knew I wouldn't stop. I knew he wouldn't either. And then, the sound of a car door slamming outside. I jerked back, my heart slamming against my ribs. Ezra stiffened beside me, his hand pulling away so fast it might never have been there at all. Footsteps approached the door. Gideon. Reality crashed down on me, cold and suffocating. What the hell was I doing? What the hell were we doing? The front door opened. I forced myself to breathe, to sit up, to look normal. But as Gideon walked in, tossing his keys on the table without even looking at me, I didn't feel normal. I felt like I was standing on the edge of something dangerous. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I wanted to step back or jump. I barely slept that night. Even after Gideon had come home, showered, and climbed into bed beside me without so much as a word, my body was still humming with the weight of what almost happened. The brush of Ezra's hand, the heat of his breath, the pull I felt, so strong, so undeniable. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my pulse still unsteady. This wasn't just loneliness anymore. It wasn't just some passing fantasy. This was real. And it was terrifying. The next night, Gideon was gone again, another late meeting, another excuse, another night where I was left alone in this house that no longer felt like a home. I sat at the kitchen table, mindlessly stirring my tea, trying to shake the weight in my chest. And then, hey. I looked up. Ezra stood in the doorway, watching me. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, those eyes were filled with something I didn't know how to name. I swallowed hard. Hey. He stepped forward, slow, deliberate. You okay? That question again, the same one he had asked in the car that night, the same one I had lied about. But this time, I didn't have the strength to lie. I shook my head. No. Ezra exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Yeah, he muttered. Didn't think so. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. And then he moved, not fast, not aggressive, just a quiet, steady step toward me. I should have stopped him. I should have gotten up, walked away, left the room, something. But I didn't. Because deep down, I knew this moment had been coming for a long time. I felt it when his fingers brushed mine on the couch. I felt it when he helped me out of that car. I felt it every time he looked at me like I was something worth seeing. My breath hitched as he reached me, standing so close I could feel the warmth of him. Say the word, he murmured. Tell me to stop, and I will. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. His hand lifted, fingers tracing the curve of my jaw, feather-light. I shuddered under his touch, my body betraying every logical thought in my head. And then he kissed me, soft, careful, hesitant, like he was testing the waters, like he was giving me a chance to pull away. But I didn't. Because for the first time in years, I felt wanted. I felt alive. But the second his lips pressed more firmly against mine, reality came crashing down. I jerked back, breath coming fast, my pulse roaring in my ears. Ezra froze, his eyes searching mine. I can't, I whispered. I shouldn't. His jaw clenched. Then why did you kiss me back? I sucked in a sharp breath. Because it was the truth. I had kissed him back. I had let this happen. I had wanted this. And that terrified me more than anything else. I shook my head, my voice barely a whisper. This is wrong. Ezra's expression darkened. Why? The question made me flinch. Why is it wrong? He pressed, his voice low but firm. Because of him. My stomach twisted. Ezra, no. Tell me, he stepped closer, his body tense. Tell me why it's wrong when he doesn't even care about you, when he treats you like furniture, when you go to bed every night feeling alone. Tears stung my eyes. That doesn't make this right. His expression softened, his voice now a murmur. Maybe not. But does it feel wrong? I opened my mouth, then stopped. Because I didn't have an answer. Because when he kissed me, when his hands touched me, when he looked at me like I was more than invisible, nothing had ever felt more right. And that was the most dangerous part of all. He exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his hair. His frustration was palpable, but beneath it was something else, something raw, something real. He hesitated before speaking again. "I've thought about this for a long time." I stiffened. "Ezra," he shook his head. "No, I need to say it." His voice was steady, unwavering. "I don't see you as just my stepmother." My heart pounded. "I never have," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "Not really." I stared at him, every rational thought unraveling. "You deserve more than what he gives you," Ezra continued, voice thick with emotion. "You deserve to be wanted, to be loved. And if he's too blind to see that," he stopped, inhaling sharply, then softer, like a confession, "I see you." My breath caught. Because in that moment, I knew he wasn't just talking about now. He was talking about every moment I'd felt invisible, unloved, unseen. He had seen me all along. And that realization was both terrifying and intoxicating. I could feel it, that choice, hovering between us. Walk away, pretend it never happened, keep living in the numbness of a dead marriage. Or give in, let myself feel again, let myself be wanted. I knew what the right choice was. I knew. But when Ezra reached for me again, his fingers grazing mine, I didn't pull away. I avoided him for days afterward, did everything to pretend it hadn't happened. I went through the motions, woke up, made breakfast, did laundry, played the devoted wife in a marriage that had long since crumbled. I avoided eye contact, kept conversation short. If Ezra was in a room, I left it. But I felt him everywhere, watching me, waiting. And the worst part? I wanted to be watched. I wanted to be wanted. And he knew it. I don't know what I expected, that he'd regret it, be scared like I was. He wasn't. If anything, he was bolder. I caught him looking at me when he thought I wouldn't notice, his eyes dark, unreadable, lingering on my lips, my hands, the bare skin beneath my dress. At dinner, he sat across from me, his gaze a silent challenge. At night, I could feel him through the wall. And when Gideon was home, when he kissed my cheek distractedly or mumbled a half-hearted good night before rolling away, Ezra knew. He knew how empty it was. And I hated him for it, because the more he saw me, the more I realized how blind I'd been. One night, I found him in the kitchen. I meant to walk past, grab water, and leave. But he didn't let me. "Are you going to keep pretending?" His voice was quiet, measured. I froze. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Because I can't." I swallowed hard, gripping the counter as if it could steady me. "Ezra, we can't do this." "Why not?" I shot him a look. "You know why." His gaze didn't waver. "That didn't stop you before." Heat rushed to my face. "That was a mistake." Ezra's jaw clenched. He stepped forward, slow, deliberate, closing the distance. "Then why are you shaking?" I hated him for that, for knowing me too well, for making me want. I turned to leave, but before I could move, his fingers brushed my wrist. Just a touch, but it was enough. Enough to make my breath hitch. Enough to remind me of the kiss. I yanked my hand away. "This is over." He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched me with those sharp, knowing eyes. And for the first time, I wasn't sure who was in control anymore. It started small. Gideon's eyes lingering a second too long. The way he came home and hesitated in the doorway, like he was watching, waiting. The offhand remarks, "You've been quiet lately. You look different. Is something going on?" I told myself it was guilt, that I was imagining it. But then, one night, he said something that made my blood run cold. "Ezra's been looking at you differently." My breath caught. "What?" Gideon didn't look up from his plate. I don't know. It's weird. He's protective of you. He let out a humorless laugh. Guess he thinks I'm not doing my job. The food turned to ash in my mouth. I forced a smile, willed my voice to stay steady. That's ridiculous. Gideon shrugged. Yeah, probably. But the way he said it, like he wasn't sure, like he was watching. I excused myself and locked the bathroom door, my pulse roaring in my ears. Did he know? Had he seen something? Or was I spiraling? I pressed my palms to the cool porcelain sink, staring at my reflection. This had to end. Now. Before I lost control. Before I lost everything. But when I closed my eyes, all I saw was Ezra. His touch. His lips. His voice whispering against my skin, I see you. And I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. I couldn't breathe in that bathroom. My hands gripped the sink, my pulse hammering in my ribs. Gideon knew. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe it was paranoia. But what if it wasn't? What if it all came crashing down? I should tell him, confess, rip off the bandage, end the madness. But the words wouldn't come. Because the truth. I didn't want to let it go. I didn't want to forget Ezra's eyes, his hands, the way he made me feel. And that was the ugliest part. The darkest part. I had never made excuses before. I'd been the good wife, the faithful wife, the woman who waited up for a husband who barely noticed her, who convinced herself that loneliness was just a phase. But it wasn't. It had been my reality. And now, standing on the edge of something I never imagined, I heard the voice in my head whisper, if he had just loved me, would I have ever let this happen? Would I have craved another man's touch? Would I have kissed Ezra back? I didn't know. And maybe I didn't want to. Because if I admitted that Gideon pushed me here, that his neglect drove me into Ezra's arms, then I wouldn't be the villain anymore. And maybe I deserved to be. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe it wasn't. I didn't know which scared me more. I told myself to forget it, to stop thinking about Ezra, that the kiss, the confession, the fire he sparked inside me was a mistake, a moment of weakness. But then I'd find myself staring at my phone, hovering over his name, or walking past his room, breath catching, wondering if he was awake, if he still wanted me the way I still wanted him. And the worst part. Some deep, shameful part of me didn't regret it. Not the way I should. Not in the way that would make me stop. Because despite the guilt, despite the fear, I ached for him. For how he saw me. For how he made me feel. And that terrified me. Because no matter how much I tried to push it down, I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. I wish I could tell you I stopped, that I came to my senses, that I did the right thing. But the truth is, I don't know what the right thing is anymore. Was it wrong to crave what I'd been denied for so long? Was it infidelity when my marriage had died years ago? Or was it fate, pushing me toward what I secretly longed for all along? Because in the end, it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like a choice. One I'd been waiting to make. And now, 2 years later, replaying every moment, I ask you, if you were me, what would you have done? Would you have walked away, or would you have surrendered to the one thing that finally made you feel alive? Tell me in the comments, was it a mistake, or was it destiny? And if you want more stories that reveal the shocking truths of love, betrayal, and the choices that define us, subscribe to Secrets and Lies. Because some secrets can never be undone.